For some reason, our video may not be working perfectly, and I want to fix that. I don't understand. Can people see me? Can anybody see me? Okay, so good afternoon. Here we should be live. Much better. Okay. All right, so sorry about that, guys. A little off here. We're going to ask Laura to come on in a second, but it's the Steve Mazzacane podcast. Mary, Tom, thank you for letting me know. Welcome to Wednesday evening. I just had a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're getting a few minutes late. We'll have Laura join us in a second, but yes, we will get to the debate last night. I don't know if I know we've gotten text all day long asking me about it. There's, we try to take a reasonable look at this, but it's kind of hard to take a reasonable look at what happened last night. So we're going to bring in Laura Bourbon here now. To those that are new or not from Brantford or just following this, Brantford recently passed some funding for a new animal shelter. It's actually 2 additions onto the existing animal shelter. The Laura and this animal shelter is kind of known throughout the state. It's kind of almost iconic in what it's become. And we're going to bring Laura on because we wanted to explain what the changes will be, how it'll affect the public, and some of the fundraising issues going forward. So, Laura, I can see you.
Hi, how are you?
And you have other people, other living objects with you. So how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. All right. First of all, who do we have?
This is Sunny. It's like living in the wild kingdom here a little bit. He is actually going to be adopted in a few minutes. He's going home. So he's been hanging out with me until his new owners are coming to pick him up.
Okay. Well, so his last few minutes at the animal shelter is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. So he's officially the second guest. You're the first, the second guest on this podcast.
Yeah, right. He's cooler than I am, though.
I'm not going to comment on that. But so, listen, earlier today I posted some renderings of the new animal shelter, talked a little bit about it passing the RTM and the Board of Finance, all passed unanimously.
Yep.
So what I'd like a little bit of help with is talk about this project, how it started, and what are some of the issues you were trying to solve by pushing this project forward?
So there was quite a few things that I always wanted to work on with the animal shelter. One of them being that the public and the staff, meaning the ACOs, when they're going out on calls, are going through the same entrance. So at times, we might get a call for a sick dog roaming or something like that, and we don't know what the dog is possibly contaminated with. And bringing that dog back to the shelter with the public standing right in the same doorway that we're entering and exiting was always a concern to me because, dogs coming in are, even if they're sickly looking, are still cute and, people want to touch them and we don't want people touching them when we don't know anything about them. So that was a concern of mine, is just setting up a separate entrance where the staff can go in and also having an area where they can then evaluate the animal. There's been no quiet place here at the shelter that you can take it into a quiet room to evaluate the animal and to see, does it really need to be brought right to an emergency vet hospital, or is it something that, can stay here with us until we figure out what's going on. So going into a separate entrance, we'll have a medical exam room where they can bring the animal right in and look it over. That's one of, the big things that always concerned me. But then also having a community room where we have a lot of programs here, from our animal camp to the Readings to the Animals program, dog behavior and handling classes. And right now we have no place to hold those classes. So once again, they're in the lobby, right where you walk into the door. You're right there in that room, basically. So there's so many different things that we're doing, with this expansion and renovation that I'm so excited about, because it's really going to change, people's experience when they come here.
Okay, so to those that are watching this, earlier we posted these renderings. You can pull these up in front of us. The current door to the animal shelter, just so we walk through this a little bit, is where the new private or the employee entrance will be.
Yes.
Right, so the new entrance we see will be public.
Yeah.
Now, you just talk to me for a second. How fast animals stay at your shelter for how long typically?
So typically they're in new homes within 7 days after they've been vetted. So every animal that goes through our facility goes through a process of being evaluated by the staff. Volunteers handle the animals. They go through vetting, meaning we make sure that obviously they're healthy enough to go out into the public. So they get spayed, neutered, vaccinated, heartworm tested. Cats are feline leukemia and AIDS tested, and they get microchipped. So, and they're handled by not only veterinarians, but the vet staff as well. So they give us evaluations too. So before we put them back out into the public, then we know kind of what's going on with them. So it's a pretty, the staff have kind of gotten it down to a science, and, they're able to get animals back out into homes pretty quickly.
All right. So just from a standpoint of talking about the use of this facility, if the average turnaround is 7 days, on an average week, how many animals will come in and go in this shelter?
A lot.
Okay, so hold on a second. If I add that to, go ahead.
So we take in and adopt out anywhere between 500 and 750 animals a year. And in comparison to some of the larger shelters in our state, like the Hartford Animal Shelter, the last time I looked, it took in maybe 1,200 animals a year. And the New Haven Animal Shelter takes in about the same as we do, about 700 animals a year. So, we're right up there with the largest municipal animal shelters in the state. We just, we have more visitors and more school groups and, different organizations that come through here to assist us. So our adoption rate is higher.
Well, that's a tribute to you. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, it's the staff and the volunteers. It's the community. I mean, the community networking and support, it's everybody. It's been a huge team effort.
Okay, so at these 500 to 750 a year, these are coming from, obviously you cover Brantford and North Brantford, but the animals are not just coming from Brantford and North Brantford. Where are all the animals coming from in general?
They come from pretty much everywhere. They come from, neighboring towns. They come from different people throughout the state. And what happens is people sponsor those animals. So if they're coming in, say an animal's coming in from East Haven, somebody will say, I'll sponsor that dog to make sure it gets spayed or neutered and vaccinated and those types of things. So it's really the donations that come in that take care of those animals. To make sure that they're cared for before they go back into a home.
Okay, so they're coming from all over the state or even out of state at times.
Yep.
We are obviously a no-kill shelter. We do not put down any animals. Is that correct?
So no, because no municipal shelter can call themselves a no-kill shelter. Our first priority is public safety. So if we feel like an animal is going to be a danger to the public, we do a lot of evaluation here of these animals before they're adopted out. And we don't typically fall into the category where we end up having to euthanize them because we work with sanctuaries and other organizations that rehabilitate, and sometimes they live their lives out at those sanctuaries. But if an animal is something that we would consider a danger, then we would not put it back out into the public, even to a sanctuary. I'm trying to get this bird to go to somebody else. Hold on one second.
Oh, okay, all right. We'll wait for him.
Go ahead. Go ahead, you're fine. You're fine, you're fine. Go with Dawn. Okay, he doesn't want to go with you. I'm sorry. He's willing now.
So he's the first person to ever not want to be on the podcast. We can see that. We can write that down. And we understand he may be interrupting you, but from a numbers standpoint, the amount approved for this project was $2.75 million in that ballpark.
Yep.
And part of that is the animal shelter itself will raise $1 million.
Yep.
You typically do somewhere between an amazing and phenomenal job on raising money. Like, you've never come and looking for a significant amount of money from the town. You've never played the these are animals card, all that kind of stuff that many people do. So I appreciate that. I know the residents of town appreciate that. But talk to me about this project from a financial standpoint. How are you doing raising the money, and also from a standpoint on a timeline to see some improvements in the plan?
So right now we've raised a little over $725,000 towards the project, and we are going to go public with the public phase of our capital campaign tomorrow at 4:00 on our Facebook page, which we're really excited about. And so, we're 3/4 of the way there, and that's been really raised through people who have been supportive of our shelter over the years. And these are people who are sitting on the capital campaign cabinet. These are people who are volunteers, who are residents of other towns. people from Guilford, people from Madison, of course, people from Brantford and North Brantford as well. So it's been really a team effort again, raising that money and getting the support we have. Our goal is to raise $1 million, but of course we want to raise as much as we possibly can, because our goal is to not burden our communities. Our goal is to, make our communities proud and to make sure we're doing the best job that we can to raise as much money as possible.
Okay, appreciate that. One person asked just about the design. From a parking standpoint, is there any additional parking?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to have more parking spots. The design of the shelter was collaborative. So there was this, and there still is, a capital campaign cabinet, which includes different people, engineers, builders, veterinarians, and others who have built shelters. And so it's been a kind of a work in progress for a long time of looking at, what should the shelter have, and also knowing that this is going to be something in place for the next 20 or 30 years, where people are going to be using this facility. So we wanted to make sure we were thinking towards the future as well.
Okay, so when I went over the plans what jumped out at me is, one, animal stores may in the near future be something of the past anyway, and we're hoping more people, rent or get their pets and dogs, what have you, from animal shelters. So there's far more access for the public. There's areas for people to meet dogs,
Yep.
spend time with dogs, that sort of thing. We have a separate access for animals that may be sick. We have quarantine rooms.
Yep.
We have a larger area for cats.
Yep.
Which I'm more of a cat guy myself, so I'm happy about that. So now the dog kennel section is getting an upgrade, but apparently, according to law, there's some limitations on what you can do there. So it's kind of in the same place sort of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're keeping the kennels the same size. It's not necessarily about being able to take in more animals, because, we take in quite a few now. It was more about the kind of the overall experience of what the animals will be like when they're here with us, having separate areas for the cats if they are sick or if they're pregnant. And then also for the dogs, it's been a concern of mine. There's no air conditioning in there. The acoustical paneling is pretty old and needed to be upgraded. And just the overall feel of how people feel when they're in the dog kennels. We don't want them to feel like it's too loud, it's too cold, it's too hot, they have to leave. And the dogs obviously being housed there for whatever period of time, we want it to be a little more homey for them, because these are animals that are coming in from homes. So, when it's really cold out right now, the heat basically goes out the door and it's not contained in the building. So I've slept there. I know how chilly it can be. So it's a concern of mine making sure that we're just being thoughtful in all the different areas for all the different kinds of animals we take in.
And just for clarification, for a school project, you slept in the kennels for 7 days. It wasn't like you were tired at home and felt like sleeping somewhere. But that's one hell of a project. Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, from a process standpoint, do we have the Standing Building Commission is going to manage this more than likely?
Yep.
Do we have a time frame? Where do we stand right now? Are all the drawings done? Do we have a construction date? That sort of thing.
So we don't have a construction date yet. We're still going through, we're sort of at the beginning stages of the whole process. So, I'd like it to be built and done like by December, but obviously that's not going to happen. So, it's going to be probably over the next year or so. Our hope is that we could be back in this building sometime, September, October of next year. But we'll see how we do.
So are there plans to relocate somewhere else temporarily?
Yeah, we're looking with the first selectman on where we would be housed for the time being. Right now, that's what we've been doing.
Okay. All right. Well, Laura, I don't see any other questions coming in. I appreciate you letting us know and giving us this update. We'll post more information publicly, and we want to follow this as it goes along. So if you're open, would you mind coming back down the road and see how it goes?
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I want to thank you and our little friend for joining us. I'll let you go before we get to last night's debate, because I'm sure you don't want to have too much of that conversation.
That's good.
Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate your work.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Okay, thank you for Laura for coming on. And it's not, I've said this many times before. Every budget season we go through this process where departments talk about, the world's coming to an end if they don't get this extra amount of money. And I kid you not, we've had debates over whether or not we should have trash removal on Sundays at the library based on funding. It was just crazy. And Laura has never done that. And the one thing that is consistent is if you want to raise money, be animals. Animals will raise you money fast. She could pack the room at any time and say, I want more money from the state, and people will bombard elected officials. She has never played that card. She's always been respectful of budgets, respectful of the process, and I appreciate that. I know our taxpayers in town appreciate that well. So thank you, Laura, for coming on, and we look forward to seeing more from this project. In Brantford, we have had I know people say I speak positively of Jamie Cosgrove, and I do, because there's reason to. If you look at the last 6-7 years, from the new Walsh Intermediate School, the Senior Center, we have combined buildings when it comes to the seniors. The Canoebrook Center can go, the 1111 Main Street where the Board of Ed building. So we are having fewer buildings, but more efficient buildings, better buildings, and now the animal shelter, a firehouse in Indian Neck. There are so many positive projects, so many good infrastructure projects happening. And this particular animal shelter is known throughout the state. And the efforts that Laura puts in are amazing. So we're glad to have that here in Brantford. And by the way, in talking off the record with some of the animal shelter people, the donations come from New York, from Madison, from Guilford, from North Brantford. So the respect people have for our animal shelter is phenomenal. Okay, now what will be a significant change of tone, we'll be discussing this last night's shit show. And there's no other way to put that. I don't know what happened. We kind of know what happened. It seems that one had a strategy to make it crazy. The other handled it okay, I guess, but wasn't great. But it's kind of hard. I've watched a lot of debates. I've seen a lot of these politicians, and I always go into these debates asking myself, all right, what points are you going to walk out with? If anybody's ever talked to me either about going door to door, my history of as being a witness, I'm very good at that. If you're a political figure and you're going door to door, you're giving a speech, every single time you give that speech or interact with another person, there should be one key fundamental point people walk away with. I just met X and I remember this about them. They're really big on this issue. None of that came out last night. We had nothing to do with issues last night, nothing to do with logic. I feel that the moderator did nothing wrong. People saying he was biased, not in any way, shape, or form. He asked very, very, very pointed questions directly at Biden. So to say he was biased was crazy. There was simply no way to gather to rein in Trump. There just wasn't a way. And so when we looked at all the comments last night, and that was mostly the sentiment, but most of the sentiment is, that was crazy, so make sure you vote for my guy. That was terrible, that was nuts, that was un-American, that was undemocratic, but make sure you vote for my guy, and my guy can solve that problem. I think the first half hour, Trump dominated. Absolutely dominated. I don't think Biden knew how to handle him. Trump made some points that I've made it here on the podcast. On how he's handled COVID, you can argue that. Is Trump responsible for 200,000 deaths? No, he's not responsible for 200,000 deaths. Could he have done things differently? In hindsight, yes, but we don't know what he would have been there. Biden did come out against closing down China. So they were just going back at each other over who said what. I can't go after Trump about that. On the tax issues, the 750 thing, that New York Times article was extremely questionable. And it's questionable because of this. It tells half the story. The tax code is created to incentivize investments. And we incentivize investments in other businesses by giving you write-offs. So if you're a billionaire, now most people like myself that are not in this category, but if you're a billionaire or whatever Trump is worth, and you invest in 50 different companies, you want all 50 to do well, but we're not dumb, and all 50 won't do well. We also know that if the business are going to be successful, the first 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 years of a business may not make money, even though long-term it may be successful. So the tax code allows you to write down these losses. And what we saw about Trump is that I think he seems to be a successful real estate person. He's clearly a very successful branding person. He's not a very successful business person from a running a business, for example, casinos. But in any event, the tax code worked for him. He paid less some years than others. I don't think that has much bearing on the election. What will likely have a bearing on the election if there were people that were left undecided, if people didn't know yesterday who they were going to vote for, I have a hard time believing that they watched that debate and would then vote for Trump. I have a hard time believing that unless they were already in the Trump category, unless they were already, I like his style, I like this, aggressive, be the king of the room at all costs kind of thing. Yeah, bullying is a good word. If you're for that style, and there are people who are for it, then you're voting for him. You saw that last night, and you saw it more than I've ever seen it. In the Republican primary 4 years ago, we saw a lot of it. Less so against Hillary, far less against Hillary. But we saw a lot of it. Last night was a whole nother level. If you were on the fence because you were questioning Biden's competence, you got some confidence last night. He was fine. I do think Trump bailed him out. On 3 or 4 occasions, Biden started this kind of didn't know what to say, might be rambling, and then Trump just interrupted him and kind of rescued him. That probably won't happen in the next debate, but Biden will probably be better prepared in the next debate. If you remember something, 8 years ago, I talked about this on my personal Facebook page yesterday. Well, maybe I didn't. I don't know where I said this. But Obama, coming on re-election, had an absolutely disastrous debate. He came out looking like Uncle Fluffy, like he was soft, and Romney crushed him. And Romney was probably, like, most of the country would kill to have Romney be on that stage right now. Because if Romney was not running against Obama, Romney would have won. Like, in the last 12 years, 4 or 5 election seasons, the top candidate may have been Obama. The second one was Romney. Like, Romney, his misfortune was having to run against Obama. And Romney crushed him in that debate. Obama came back the second time and got his mojo back. And it was like, all right, there he is. There's the Obama we expected. So an incumbent coming off that first 4 years, maybe that's kind of a thing where you have a hard time in that first debate. I don't know that if Trump left that debate thinking he had a hard time. Like, was that his actual strategy, to come in and not let anybody else talk? In the first half hour, it was like kind of in check, right? He had a few good lines. I've been in there for 47 months. We got more than for near 47 years. There were some things. This COVID. You can go back and forth on COVID in hindsight all day long. I'm not going to blame him on the taxes. Okay, there were some responses that made sense. He looked like he was dominating. Then he just became a massive asshole. And I know there's people who already thought he was, right? So I'm not in the category of everything Trump does is bad. I don't believe that. I've defended him. But he became like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you this way? Like, if you're in Brantford, there are people who come to town meetings sometimes and act that way, and we're all like, oh, Jesus Christ. That was the kind of exact feeling I had about 40 minutes into this debate. Like, what the hell? And then you reach a very simple, basic moment. Will you condemn white supremacy? I don't know how. There's only one answer to that question. There's only one answer by anybody, anywhere. There's no discussion. Once you hear that question, it's like saying, do you like Nazis? Like, how do you feel about cancer? Like, there's only one answer to, will you condemn white supremacy? And the fact that his answer was anything but that, and then attacking the other side, if you're an undecided, and people were watching my personal Facebook page yesterday, I was posting my thoughts. My thoughts weren't, it were my thoughts certainly, but I look at things in the standpoint of, how does this impact that potentially undecided voter? And for the life of me, I don't know how an undecided voter at that moment says, yeah, I want this guy as my president. Yeah, I want to go stand in line, get into a booth with a ballot and check for his name because I want him to be my president. I don't know how you get there. Now, will that aspect change much? Probably not, because his base has been those groups anyway. I don't know that that's a game changer, but I think those that had not made their minds up are going to have a hard time walking into a booth saying, I'm voting for this guy. Now, granted, all of the polling right now, you know what, let's look this up. The polling right now, I go to Real Clear Politics and look at where we stand. I don't care about the polling overall nationally. That's irrelevant. I care about the polling in the battleground states. So right now, Florida, Biden's up 1. That's close. Pennsylvania, Biden's up 5. Biden's going to win Pennsylvania. Michigan, he's up 5.2. Wisconsin, up 5. North Carolina, barely. It's almost tied there. Arizona, Biden's up 2.4. So we're looking at Biden with significant leads, even if the polling's off. And I believe the polling's off. I believe Trump supporters don't say they're Trump supporters. And I believe people are harder and harder to get a hold of. So I think the polling may be off. I would give Trump 2 to 2.5 points on all these polls, which means he's still losing Pennsylvania, still losing Michigan, still losing Wisconsin. He is still losing New Hampshire. He's still losing Ohio. He's close in Georgia. He's taking Texas by only 3 points, and he would be losing Nevada. So even if we were to give Trump 2 to 2.5 points in the polling, he's still losing every single battleground state. So even if we give him a huge... Now, if you want to give him 5 points, it might be closer. Florida, he might take Florida, but the big states he won't take. And so what he needed to do last night was come across presidential. What he needed to do was say, listen, I know these people yell and scream. They don't like my tweeting. They don't like some of the stuff I said, but I'll tell you what. I'm a leader. I have policies, and I want to move us forward. That's what he needed to come out and do. And he could have done that if he was the Trump from 4 years ago against Hillary. He's not getting my vote. I'm not a Trump supporter. There's a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about that, and I've talked about that before. But to those that may have been on the fence, and there's a lot of people still on the fence. Yes, a lot of Biden voters, but Biden isn't like, oh my God, I can't wait to vote for Joe Biden. Like, there's no one like massively supportive of Joe Biden. You can replace Joe Biden's with any Democrat's name, and the same people will be voting for that person. It's not Biden. It's, we don't want Trump. And to those people, and Trump has done a good job in many ways of convincing some people he's the victim. They're out to get me. The Democrats are out to get me. The polling's all against me, and the media is all against me, and everybody's against me. And remember, Trump is someone the public likes. Whether people want to see it or not, this is a guy who had a #1 rated TV show. I lived in New York City in 98 to 99. He was on the front page of every paper constantly. Constantly. If he was seen around town, it was in the paper. He was in a Home Alone movie. So this is somebody who is a likable person to much of the... He may be the bad guy. He may have that big bad business guy. He might be the jerk, but he's a likable jerk. People like him. And when that's the case, they look for a reason to vote for that person, or looking for a reason to like... And he basically said, go screw yourself. I'm giving you nothing. I'm catering to my tight base, which is not enough to win an election. And I'm going to do nothing to act like a civilized human being on a national stage. But hold on, let's rephrase that. On an international stage. With the entire planet watching, I am going to bully everybody. I don't think the country still wants that. And the concern I have is if this race is close. Now, if Biden takes all of these states we're talking about, let's go back over, if Real Clear Politics has them. If Biden, let's give Trump 2 points on everything. So in Georgia, he's ahead, so he wins Georgia. Ohio, Biden's up 3.3, so Biden wins that. New Hampshire, Biden's way up. Minnesota is a tie. So that goes to Trump. Even if we take all of these races, Biden's up over 2 points in Arizona, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in New Hampshire, big, obviously, in Nevada, tied in Iowa. So Trump would take Texas, Iowa, and Texas is even on this list, is amazing. Texas, Iowa, Georgia, and Florida, which would not be enough to win. And if it becomes a court battle, this is going to get nasty. And the question becomes, if you know Trump is going to lose, if the 3 days before the election, Biden has 5-6 point leads in most of these swing states, it makes sense for the betterment of the country to say, listen, let's just jump on board. Let's make sure this is a blowout. And Trump's going to yell and scream, but if this becomes the shit show we saw last night for 3 or 4 months after Election Day, that's permanent damage to the country. And remember something about that debate last night. Remember something about what we're seeing right now. It's not us. I'm 42 years old. Most of my viewers are my age, a little older. There's a whole generation of kids whose first debate was that. There's a whole generation of classrooms whose first debate was watching what we saw last night. How do you then tell your kids to hold politicians in esteem and our government in esteem? If that's their impression of our political process, how much faith are they ever going to have in the political process? Why would they ever want to get involved? Why would they ever want to be informed? And I don't subscribe to the theory of, oh, they were both nasty. They weren't both nasty. Trump was nasty. Biden wasn't nasty. Yeah, Biden said some things back that are probably inappropriate to say to a president, but considering the situation, like, you don't tell a president to shut up. But there was extraordinary circumstances last night. But we have to remember that there is a whole generation of kids that their first president, and not just that they're less than 4 years old, but their first experience in politics watching it. I saw a lot of pictures where families with kids sitting on couches watching that debate last night. And the first thought I thought was, is this really what they're seeing? Is this normal? Should this be considered normal? What do you say to somebody who's 11 or 12 years old, who teacher said to them, go home tonight and write about that debate? Because that's what happened when I was in school. Maybe not 11 or 12, maybe a little bit older. But go back home and write about that debate. I don't want to read those papers. So, I don't know. Kathy just posted, Trump will do better next debate and everyone will forget the first one. Biden will take away the tax cuts and manufacturing will remain in China's control. Not good. Okay, so we can talk about that. If he does better next debate, fine. I think a lot of people would have watched last night and said that a person is capable of that sort of performance. This wasn't Obama performing poorly in his first debate for re-election, right? That first Romney debate. This was somebody doing and saying things that were, whoa. Like, you wouldn't let the moderator, who is from Fox News, who's interviewed you multiple times, get a question in. And maybe he'll somehow try to clarify that I should have answered, maybe he was nervous and he didn't say why he wouldn't condemn white supremacy or whatever it is. Okay, maybe. I just don't think he's going to have the ability to move the needle. Now, I stand by this. People want to like him. There are people who want to like Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump gets up there and suddenly becomes presidential and gives, I don't know, I don't want to say an Obama performance, but let's just say he gives a Dukakis performance. Somebody who didn't do very well, but was more of a politician and more political, and it looked a little bit more dignified. If he walks in and does that, will there be people who say, all right, that's what I was looking for? Because there are people who want to like Donald Trump. There are people who want to vote for Donald Trump. In Biden's those people, they may be voting for Biden, but Biden doesn't have some massive pull on him. So I don't think this race is done. I don't think anybody got kicked out or knocked out yesterday. And I think there is a group of voters who want to vote for Donald Trump. I also think there's a lot of voters who may want to and think, yeah, I don't know, after last night. And I question his ability to not be that way. Because once that's stuck in his head, don't do what you did before, I don't know if he can perform the same way. It was ugly. It was a sad night. And I'd be curious if we have any teachers in the next couple of days that want to talk about the response of students that watched that debate last night, because that was pretty amazing. It was, it's hard to put into words what that was. Okay, it's a little bit longer today because we had an extended amount, and I will try. People have been asking me, and I actually like kind of having some interviews, so I'm going to try to get some people running for office on, elected officials, town officials, what have you, in the next few weeks leading up to the election, and we'll have a few more interviews. Tomorrow, because we'll be getting a ton of emails on planning and zoning in Brantford. So if you're listening from Brantford, we'll be talking mostly about development tomorrow. Just getting some facts straight. There's some misinformation going on out there. And we'll talk about that because tomorrow night is a planning and zoning hearing. There's a bunch of stuff on that agenda. So the mail-in ballot is going to be a disaster, especially if they're being already thrown out. I think the story we heard, Joe, so let's get Tom's first. The mail-in ballot is going to be, look, there was one thing with, I think, 9 ballots or 7 ballots, and they were all for Trump. There's going to be some issues. There's no question. There's always going to be. I think most towns and most municipalities are capable of handling this. I don't have a problem with mail-in voting. It's going to happen. It's going to be the way of the future no matter what. So, I just assume be cautious, have your eyes open. If you see something that's off, call, let us know, that sort of thing. And that's why if this thing is close, if this race is close, we remember the Florida issue with the Supreme Court and Al Gore. First, Al Gore's walked away at some point, just said, okay, I'm not going to keep going because he was a classy politician. That's not going to happen on either side in this case. So they're going to go on forever. That's why it might go on for 3 months. And that's my point of, if it's clear Trump's not going to win, do you keep voting for him knowing that you might potentially put the country in, 12 swing states all have massive legal battles for the next 6-7 years, all go to the Supreme Court, then the Supreme Court rules for Trump because obviously, he's going to control the Supreme Court. So you end up in this complete crap situation for 3 or 4 months. And I do think the damage that does to the country as a whole, to a whole generation of young people who are watching this for the first time or involved in the first time, it's just massive. I think for the betterment of the country, we may want to think what we do with our votes. Not in Connecticut, obviously, it doesn't matter as much, but it is what it is. Joe, I kind of answered your question having this, what is your take on the president refusing to say he would accept the election results if he was not declared the winner? Listen, if you're declared the loser, if the election results are certified, it's done. He wasn't answering that question. He was saying to himself, after election day, if there was a battle, basically I'm going to keep battling forever. And by the way, there isn't a Democrat that isn't saying the exact same thing to Biden. No, don't do what Gore did, is what everybody's telling everybody. Fight forever. So the way that question is worded is, once he's declared the winner and certified officially, you leave. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter if you don't have to accept it. If a girl leaves you, you don't accept it. Doesn't matter, and she's gone. So if you lose the election and it's certified, you don't accept it, it's irrelevant. You're gone, and there's enough security and there's enough people that can remove you from office physically if needed. I think what he is saying, if we're taking a reasonable approach to this, is if there's a question anywhere, then I'm going to fight. And that's the point here, is if this does come down to 2 or 3 or 4 states, they're both going to fight forever. And it's going to be ugly. And now you have these little groups forming, and the left is forming legal defense funds, and the right is their, I don't know, what seems to be little militias or whatever the heck it is. I never heard of this Good Boys or whatever boys group. This group got more publicity in one debate, and no one had ever heard of them, just because of one presidential mention. That's the power of the president. But last night was the first half hour. I thought, all right, Joe Biden has to wake up. And about 40 minutes in, I saw a unstable person dominate that stage. And normally when you say someone dominated the stage, it's a good thing. It wasn't a good thing. And to those in Brantford that have been to town meetings and have watched one or two very particular individuals dominate town meetings and not shut up and interrupt everybody else, we know what that's like. And so the moderator did nothing wrong. Joe Biden wasn't on his best, but how would you be? So it will be interesting. Listen, I'm watching the next debate. And actually, what we're probably going to do next debate, because people have asked, is go live afterwards and have a conversation. But, it is what it is. Just a crazy night. Just really a crazy night. I've never seen that. I remember at one point sitting on the couch, looking around the room, thinking, I need to remember where I was watching this debate. That's just how messed up it was. So, that said, we'll be back tomorrow. If there's political questions, well, certainly I'm looking at polling and I'm looking at a bunch of stuff. Everybody does ask this, so I will say this. I do tell you what stocks I buy. Yesterday I bought more CVS and I bought DraftKings, and I'm extremely happy today with how they've done. So I think CVS is a great buy. I know people ask me that question a lot. What am I buying? I'm not telling you. I don't know if it'll go up or not. I can't guarantee anything. That's just my research and what I'm doing. Tom, you might be too fired to go live after that. I wasn't too fired up yesterday. When I post live, I'm not posting that I'm mad or angry. I'm thinking in terms of, does this move the needle? Are there people who are undecided who are now saying, well, all right, that changed my mind? There were a few statements by Biden. I was like, whoa, what are you doing? There were certainly opportunities by Biden that were missed. I think Trump went into that debate with 4 or 5 points to be made. He made them in the first half hour, and then he's like, well, I got time to blow, and let me just put on a show. And he did. Okay, guys, thank you. It's 45 minutes, a little bit longer today, obviously, but we will be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I thank you for joining us, and thank you so much for the support. A lot of emails. If you'd like to donate, just go to Brantford 7 and click on there. If not, fine, just comment and come and share the podcast if you can. Thanks for joining us. I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.